Today I will continue to bring you a murderous movie from the upper house in 2024. Okay, let's not talk much. Let's start the story. The woman came home from get off work and just put her bag in the car, fighting for a while to relax. Unexpectedly, there was someone not far away who seemed to want to hang himself. The woman looked at her curiously for a few more times, but the man suddenly turned around and ran towards the woman. The woman was frightened and wanted to drive and run away, but unfortunately the car door was locked at some point. She hurriedly turned around and looked at the man. Strangely, the man disappeared. The woman looked back at the car, but was knocked down by the car door. It turned out that there was someone in the car. At the same time, the cleaning lady who had just changed shifts with the woman was cleaning the hotel corridor. A sudden sound came from behind her, but she turned around but saw no one. She asked who it was, but no one responded. She thought she had heard it all. So he turned around and continued to work, but the vacuum cleaner in his hand suddenly broke. When he looked back, he found that the wire was broken. He walked over and saw that it seemed that it had been cut. Aunt Bao wanted to find a tool to repair it, but turned around and was startled by the power worker. After the incident, his colleague advised her not to make a fuss. The mouse in the basement was recently. Maybe they bit off the wire, and the colleague asked the aunt to relieve her and wipe them out together. After hearing Xiao Hua say this, the healthcare aunt sincerely thanked her, and then the two left one after another, but the healthcare aunt was pushed out as soon as she turned, and then she was kidnapped by the man. In the dark basement, the cleaner was tied to a chair while the murderer was choosing tools, a hand-lifting tool. In this way, the woman rewinds to death. When I put in the hotel lobby, Away took his family to travel and happened to stay here. Strangely, the boss only collects cash and does not swipe the card. Away didn't think much about it, and after paying the cash, he went upstairs to rest. After they left, the boss smiled beautifully because the number of people was enough and the game was about to begin. Suddenly, a man came over. He was a colleague of the cleaning lady, but he didn't know the boss. The boss lied that he was new and didn't believe it. You can ask the cleaning lady. So the two of them came to the basement, but the boss picked up the fire extinguisher and knocked the man out in an instant. The boss called his accomplices and plumbers to let them do things with caution and never make any mistakes. He said that his work had been completed and would not participate in their game. After that, he asked the boss for revenge. When the money was obtained, the plumber turned around and left, and the boss pressed the door lock system to lock all the doors and windows of the hotel. The first one is unlucky, but the game hall administrator, he played the game alone and did not notice the existence of the masked man at all. We found out the masked man had already left. He comforted himself and said that he was an illusion just now. There was no one there. Don't scare yourself. The administrator was beaten so hard that he could not move and lay motionless on the ground. The bald butcher did not intend to stop. Not only did he cut off the administrator's nose, but he also smashed his head to pieces. The picture was bloody, so there's no more display here. If you're interested, you can watch the original movie. The second unlucky one was to fight the surgeon girl. The two of them had a cold shower when they first checked in. After they arrived in the room, they even experienced the charm of the jacuzzi. Just as the two of them were infused, Xiao Qingyu stood silently aside, and the two were really shocked. Xiao Qingyu left quickly, but the man was smashed in the head. It turned out that it was done by the second butcher. If nothing unexpected happens, the man was drowned in the bathtub, and the woman could not escape the clutches. At the same time, Xiaomei took advantage of her family's sleep and secretly ran to another room to date a French boy. She just met during the day. I was such a rebellious child, but unfortunately, I was discovered by my parents. So my father went out to search and took my younger brother with me. But after they left, a nightmare also followed. My mother heard someone knocking on the door and saw a masked man through the cat's eyes. She thought it was someone else's prank, so she scolded the masked man for leaving quickly. When the masked man saw that he was a tough guy, he left immediately. But when his mother sat back on the bed, the door opened. She thought that her husband had returned, so she asked if she had found Xiaomei, but she didn't get an answer. She ran to see that the door was open, but she saw no one. Wuxing closed the door without thinking too much. He was such a big-hearted woman. If nothing happened, he would be really sorry to the audience. So she was locked in the throat by the masked man. Although she resisted hard, poked the masked man's head with a pin and smashed the masked man's face with a cup. But there was no bird oil, which instead angered the number one butcher. The 5-star was pressed on the ground and could not be moved, and the belt was cut off by the butcher with iron wire. At the same time, the boss was sitting in front of the screen, admiring the masterpiece of butcher number one. He was happy, but he also thought about winning. In time, he put on a plastic coat, picked up a knife, and stabbed it directly into PNG's chin, but did not notice that Xiaomei and French had secretly left the hotel. At the same time, Away brought his son to the front desk, but he didn't see anyone or friend. At the same time, he found that all the doors could not be opened, so the two returned to the room. However, Away found that his wife was brutally killed, and sadness enveloped his whole body, but he could not cry loudly because his son was still beside him. In order not to be seen by his son, he planned to take his son away, but when he went out, he met an old man, a retired policeman. After learning the truth, the old policeman suggested that Away take the child to his room to rest. The two settled their son and then went downstairs to find their daughter with guns. The old policeman told Abby that this might be a murder game and that there had been similar cases in Grandel where people in a building were trapped inside, one after another, like some kind of game. There is no motive for murder, and one more creative. As soon as he finished speaking, a drunk man suddenly appeared, and the three of them were shocked. Several people talked loudly. They also scolded the drunkard for going back to the room to sleep. Suddenly the radio rang out, and it was the boss's voice. He said that since everyone stepped into the hotel, the game had begun. The boss's radio also attracted two people. One was a white-haired old man, and the other was glasses. But they were all here to give away their heads because the boss announced.
So, buckle up! Warm-ups are over, ladies and gents. Let's play ball!
The hotel suddenly fell into darkness, and a few screams appeared during the period. When the lights light up again, the drunk couple had their lunchboxes on their faces. One was chopped off their necks, and the other was inserted in the statue. The masked butcher also officially took the stage. First, the old white-haired man was squeezed out by the bald butcher, and then Yan Jingyu was killed by the butcher number 1. 8 people wanted to come forward to help, but were pulled away by the old policeman. The two hid in the bar, so they escaped. The picture came upstairs, and the 3 young boys met the butcher group. Jean Wang was unfortunately stabbed to death, while the curly man was pressed against the wall. Shally had never seen this, so she turned around and ran away in fear. The clown girl wanted to go forward to chase her, but was stopped by the second digit poison husband because she still had more fun curly hair in her hand. In this way, the curly hair was biochemically and 39. Finally, the grave was established on the spot, but Shally didn't run for long and met the little boy at the corner. It turned out that she had hacked into the hotel system and knew that it was a murder game, so she was worried about her mother, so she ran out. Unexpectedly, I met Shally, but unfortunately, I also met the number 1 butcher. Shally had no time to say anything and ran away with the boy. The two ran all the way to the elevator entrance and wanted to take the elevator to escape, but unfortunately before the elevator was opened, the number 1 butcher chased after him, but he didn't rush to take action, but looked at the two of them sucking blood. Suddenly the elevator opened until it was Xiao Zhuyu, and he grabbed Shally in his hand. The number 1 butcher watched quietly, without any movement. The little boy took the opportunity to escape, and found that Shally was pushed out. She got up and ran away, but the clown girl was not in a hurry. Just like a cat playing with a mouse, Shally looked for the exit everywhere. Unfortunately, they were all locked up. If you want to survive, you can only be hard with Xiao Qingyu. Although he was lucky enough to knock Xiao Qingyu off, his skills were far from his opponent. He was pressed to the ground and rubbed it down. Xiaolin touched a fork. He gave the clown girl a casualty, which was really surprising. In this way, the clown girl died in a daze. Shally didn't dare to stay and look for escape everywhere. You can't say that there is really a window that can escape. However, it's a pity that the second butcher chased after her in time and grabbed Shally. The two of them were immediately pulled into the limit. In the end, Shally kicked the butcher away with a flying kick and escaped by dance. Seeing the butcher's unwilling look, Shally smiled happily. On the other side, Away and the old policeman heard nothing outside, so they showed up and ran back to the room to find their son. Unfortunately, they couldn't find it. The two hurried out to look for it again, but they met a bald butcher. Just when Away and the butcher were in a stalemate, the old policeman wanted to raid, but unexpectedly he was knocked out and Away was kicked away. Seeing that Away was in danger, the Spectrum butcher suddenly fell down. It turned out that the old policeman shot him to death. At this moment, Xiaomei and French returned to the hotel. Looking at the strange lights in the corridor, they felt very strange. As soon as I turned around, I saw the body of Curly Hair and Jinpa Mei. The two of them were so scared that they turned around and wanted to escape. The second butcher, like a pair of people, nailed them to the wall, completing a rare double kill. The camera came to Away and the others. They came to the corner. Away shouted loudly for his son, but was opposed by the old police, because shouting loudly would attract the butcher, but Away didn't care. It is better to attract a butcher than to be found by his son. Unfortunately, Cao Cao arrived, but the number 1 butcher and Away started fighting. No matter how Away asked for help, the old policeman was indifferent because he had put all his money on the number 1 butcher. Now is the time for the old policeman to leave, but he must find the unlock password. So he came to the monitoring room, but unfortunately he didn't find a password, but saw that the two of them were showing signs of turning the tables. So the old policeman turned on the mouth-blowing mode and said that Away's family was dead, and the death was very tragic. If a man could not protect his family, he might as well die. Away was not discouraged, but instead moved the battlefield to a surveillance corner. The old policeman couldn't sit still anymore and hurriedly checked Away's traces. No matter how troubles were, the butcher number 1 came out of the dead corner. After seeing it, the old policeman almost jumped up happily, but the old saying goes well, and a masked butcher appeared quietly and stabbed the old policeman with a knife. It turned out to be a fake hotel owner. He said that although the old policeman was better, he entered the game with his own hands and maliciously manipulated the game, which violated the rules of the game, so he had to die. If something happens, if the policeman's head is also stuck so far, there's still numbers 1 and 2 left, and there are only little boys in the press. So now the rules of the game have changed. Whoever kills the little boy first will have 3 points. The first person to find the little boy was Butcher number 1, but under the mask was Away's face. He asked his son to pretend to be dead, trying to deceive others. When the second Butcher came, I really thought he had failed, but he never deceived the boss because he played the video again. Until the first Butcher number 1 was pretended by Away. He hurriedly used the radio to advertise the second Butcher number 2. However, Away was still identified first, but the second Butcher number 2 was not a vegetarian. So he attacked Away with his backhand and pressed him on the table to rub it. He thought Away was about to finish playing, but the little man picked up the knife. He took the opportunity to kill him, pressed the second Butcher number 2 tightly on the stove, and then gave his son a wake. The son shook instantly and turned on the ignition device, which burned the second Butcher number 2. So far, 4 Butchers served the entire army, but this was not the end of the game, because the boss was going to start the Stern game in person. At this time, Away took his son to the hall. Before he could open the door, the boss came to chase him. He looked at Away shamelessly, and his heart was dead. Why you still have to resist tenaciously? This will cause many financial owners to lose a lot of money. This is not the end. He also mocked Away for being incompetent. He didn't know how helpless his wife was when she died, and how fearful his daughter was when she died. Little did they know that these ridiculous words actually killed the boss, because these words inspired Away's fighting spirit. He dodged the tiger's head and then gave the boss a turtle punch, completely telling him goodbye to the bicycle. Away hugged his son tightly, feeling the difficulty of the rest of his life. He thought they would live happily, but who knew?
Hey, we're safe! Dad! Oh my God! Dad!
It was really a touching fate. Away killed all the Butchers, but was accidentally killed by his rebellious daughter. It was really unpleasant. Just when everyone thought the brothers and sisters depended on each other from now on, the boss got up again. He moved Xiaomei to the wall, trying to strangle her to death. But like all men, he forgot the move that men fear the most, and the knee that was cut off. Xiaomei took the opportunity to pick up the axe and cut off the boss's head directly. The game is really over. The siblings were thrown into the police and were placed in a US-style explosion device. But when you look at the little policeman's mobile phone, you'll see a recent photo. Well, it turns out that they bought the bookmaker, but the boss behind the massacre game is still active in the live broadcast room and slowly penetrates into people's lives. Okay, today's story ends here. See you next time.